Hello, my name is John Pacey. I'm the Director of Cloud Development at Wolfram Research, and today I'm going to give a talk on the state of the cloud, where I'll go over some improvements and new features that are upcoming and where we're going to go in the next year. Thank you. So my name is John Pacey. I'm the Director of Cloud Development here at Wolfram Research. And some of you might be wondering, why isn't Jan giving this talk, since he's given it for the last several years? And so yeah, Jan decided to start his own company, and that means that I got a little bit promoted. So yeah, that's why it's a little bit different person here talking to this, even though I've usually given talks here before, particularly with graphics and notebooks. And so today we have sort of two back-to-back talks. I'll start with the state of the Wolfram Cloud, and then Matt Adams is going to have a specific talk about the state of graphics rendering in the cloud. So it's okay if we sort of skip over to that a little bit. So I'll go ahead and get started. So again, I'll give a brief overview of what the cloud is, although hopefully most of you already know what that is. And then I'll talk about some new features and some other things in our sort of roadmap for the next year. So the whole point of the cloud is to bring the power of Wolfram technology, in particular notebooks, to the browser. You're going to be using a notebook inside the browser without any downloads, any installation of software. You're also going to be able to share this sort of as a content publishing platform of sharing notebooks. Good way to do that to others, again, without any need to download software. And you'll also be able to deploy applications that are written in the Wolfram language. And this is sort of a hybrid of, could be a mix of HTML and typical web applications, and also just something more driven behind the hood with Wolfram language. And what I'm showing you right now is actually a cloud notebook. So this is a cloud notebook in slideshow view. And what I can do right away is go ahead and evaluate. So let's see if get the zoom bar out of the way here. Okay, so I am working in an environment view notebook where I have a kernel, and I can go ahead and evaluate this. This is coming through my web browser. And so we have a lot of the functionality that you have in desktop, but one thing's, there are some limitations, in particular for our editor. So we don't allow you to do 2D editing of output, for example. And that is one of our longer term goals, but it's kind of a tricky thing. And you can do all of the typical Wolfram language functions. You can even make manipulates with plots. So here to make this bigger. So we have a plot here, basic cosine function. And this is, again, working purely in the browser, doing a little bit of server communication for some of that. And again, one of the features of the cloud, and that you can do this, and sort of use a function called cloud publish, which is basically a reference to your file or cloud object that's running in the Wolfram Cloud. And so I've just deployed this simple manipulate here. And again, this is a separate object that I can go to. And if I must have messed up my sliders here for the default values. But again, this is working right there. There's concept of permissions. You can make this public so anybody can go there and use it. Again, it's just a very brief introduction to all the things that we can do. So you have your typical notebook level things, but we also have more web-based concepts of API functions or form functions to do very easily generate sort of typical web-based evaluations around HTTP functions. So this first example here is going to deploy a very simple API function that's going to take a parameter X and then just use that into factor integer with Wolfram language. So when I initially go to this URL, it says you need to actually provide a parameter here. And so I can go ahead and do that. So I say X equals, I don't know, let's say 5, and let's see what happens. I should give something much bigger than that, actually. So let's do 100. Pretty simple. And it gives me a result back. So again, we have concepts of form functions, which is, again, a nice way to package up the ability to do something. This one's slightly more elaborate in that I am going to tell it to speak, which you probably can't hear through this, but the default value is hello world. And if I submit that, it'll take a little bit here. Generate my sound and
hello world.
So if you're here with me, you can hear that. I don't know if that's coming over Zoom. So again, kind of a little bit of a toy example, but a good example of what you can do pretty quickly. And you can combine these things. So what I have here is an API function that takes a parameter for choices, which is supposed to be basically a string of choices. And what it's going to do is go ahead and redirect me to a form that it creates. And this form is not going to do anything special. It's just going to basically return the choice that I had. But you can do sort of combinations of these things. And again, I'm doing this in real time. So again, it wants me to provide a parameter. In this case, we'll say choices are apple, banana, pear, and mango. And what that API function did was create this form function, a very simple one, which has all of my choices. And then I can choose one. And again, if I hit submit here, it will execute my form function, which was extremely simple in this case. It just says return your choice. Okay. And again, you can do more typical web-based things with this, utilizing the power of the Wolfram language. And in this case, the API function I'm creating here is going to, let's see, I need a name, and I will pick on Tom. I will say Tom Jones. So there we go. Again, very toy example, but I'm generating HTML dynamically based off of my API function that I gave. Okay. All right. So again, these are some of the features that we can do, and using a combination of notebooks, using content that I want to generate with Wolfram language, the concept of cloud objects, API functions, form functions, you can build web applications. And one thing that we want to be able to do is to play nicely within the wider JavaScript ecosystem, or HTML in general. And so what we have for that is the Wolfram Notebook Embedder, which is an NPM library or a JavaScript library you can download to make it very easy to embed public notebooks within your site. So again, this was taken from an example that we showed before in the past year. And again, this has been pretty popular. We have quite a few downloads of this library weekly. So just also wanted to mention that. And again, sort of what I've highlighted here, what I think we should do a better job of documenting and showing examples of is actually building applications within the cloud and using cloud content. And so we do this a ton internally at Wolfram. And so here's just a few examples of the various Wolfram sites that have been built using the Wolfram Cloud. And these have existed for pretty much almost all of the time that we've had the cloud, but I think we should highlight these a little bit more. So Wolfram Community, for example, and Wolfram U, those make really good use of embedded notebooks, either through iframes or the notebook embedder. And then Data Drop and Wolfram Function Repository are actually built and deployed into the public cloud, and they're using combinations of generated HTML that they serve and host in the cloud, in the public Wolfram Cloud, and also a combination of API functions that they deploy, as well as form functions. And so again, very interested in seeing what people are building. And so reach out to us and see what's working, what's not working. And I think what I want to try to do is have a better outreach and showing you other people how we're building things and tips and tricks to make it easier for others to build. Okay. So that sort of covers my brief intro to what the cloud is and how it can be used. So now I'll talk a little bit about sort of some new features or where we're going in current cloud development. So one key new product feature in Wolfram in the past few years is so-called Wolfram Alpha notebooks. And so what these are styled notebooks that have take the more, I guess, gradual or natural language form to make it easy for people to do evaluations and sort of take natural language into that. It's probably easier for me to show you this, for what this means. And so again, these are really good examples to ensure that cloud is actually supporting or rendering things correctly in terms of the general Wolfram language and notebook programming in general. So basically, Wolfram Alpha notebooks use a lot of features that are built into notebooks. And so it's a really good test case for how well cloud has implemented that. It also happens to be a really nice experience for things like education or just an entry level to Wolfram language. So what we're doing is prioritizing those bugs and the experience for that. And so again, this is running in the cloud, and this is a Wolfram Alpha notebook, which is set through style sheets. It has a bit of a different input style here, where you can just do simple integer arithmetic, and you get a result back. You can use step by step. sorry. So it's a good way to introduce people to Wolfram language, and it's great for education. And it's one of the things that we're prioritizing in fixing these bugs. And again, as I said, supporting these notebooks just helps us support general notebooks. So the things we're doing here are not just specific to Wolfram Alpha notebooks, they're just specific to general notebooks. So that can make your functions or your existing content are going to be rendered more easily in cloud. Okay. Let's see. And the next thing I want to show. So that's one of the big things that we're prioritizing. Another new feature that we think is pretty cool is something called, we refer to as deployed view editing. I need to work on what this actually means to describe it, but basically what this is going to do is allow users to start evaluating and editing your own copy of a notebook right away. So basically you give a deployed object URL, and that's going to let people immediately have their own copy and start editing it. So why do we want this? Well, we wanted to bring back something we used to call Open Cloud, which was a way for unauthenticated or new users to start working and learning Wolfram language without necessarily having to sign in. And sort of, this is our better re-implementation of that as a core notebook feature so that it'll just work everywhere, including in embedded notebooks. So this isn't quite yet ready for prime time, and we're first going to use it internally, but it's definitely something we want to make available. So I have an example here on our test server, which you can't get to, and I'll try to explain a little bit about how this works. So this is our deployed view, which typically is a read-only view, but with this new feature, you can have it to be editing. And so I will sort of copy this URL, and I'm going to start a new incognito to show you that I'm not signed in. And I'm just going to, I don't want, that didn't copy what I wanted. Yeah, okay. And I need to switch the URL here to obj. And if I type this correctly, should, because it's not on test. Let's see. My fault for not grabbing the right URL. Okay. All right, so thank you for bearing with me. And there we go. Okay. So I'm in incognito. I have not signed in. As you can see up here at the top, maybe it's a bit small and my Zoom bar is blocking it a little bit, but so I have not signed in. I could sign in, but I won't because that's not super interesting. I can still download it, and right away I can go ahead and evaluate and edit. So I will do my typical plot example, and I will go ahead and add some text. Okay, so I haven't signed in. It's just to a public cloud object that I created separately on my account. And then I can save these edits if I want. And if I, let's see, if I close this out, basically my edits are not saved unless I want them to. So it's sort of kind of scratch editing. And so then if I go back again in my incognito window, I get back to the original. Okay. So this is a pretty powerful feature for allowing people to start with notebooks, basically having a base level that you want to start them with. They can start editing, still doesn't change your original, and then they can sign in or save the content as needed. And again, the example here that I'm showing is when I'm not signed in, so allowing anyone as long as it's public, but this also just works, right? It could be used for signed in users or anything else like that. Okay, all right. So that's a big feature that we are wanting to show off soon. Another project that we've had going, again, that we announced sort of last year was sort of more under the hood, and that is moving the cloud's core architecture into containers. And so this is still a big ongoing project for us. It's a priority sort of long-term for improved stability and being more robust and fully scalable, and also to improve the enterprise cloud experience. And so again, this is something that's pretty complicated. We're still working on it. And if you're interested in this, or your EPC is, that's a use case that you want to know, please let us know. That helps us continue to prioritize it or allocate more resources based on how useful people think that is. But again, that is one of our longer term goals, and it's still in progress. Whoops, that right. And then another big ongoing longer term project is something that we call native graphics. And again, we've given sort of updates on this in the last few years. And the reason why this is important is so we can purely render graphics in the browser. I'll let Matt sort of talk about this in the next talk. But right now, one of the drawbacks to how we render graphics is that it's reliant on the server side to generate some extra data. And so there's back and forth when you want to do some updates of graphics. And so again, these examples are being purely rendered entirely on the browser side. We're not going back to the server at all. And you can, the reason why this is important is you can do things like this animation. This is purely happening in the browser on the client side. We're not going back to the server at all to update these, which is quite powerful. And so again, we made some good progress there, particularly around inset. But again, I'll let Matt talk about that one a bit more. Okay. And then just sort of a grab bag of other sort of improvements or priorities as we're moving forward. So we want to make the experience of working with cloud objects a lot easier, particularly going from desktop to cloud. And what that means is making sure that we add support and make performance improvements for allowing cloud objects to just work with all of the other file-related Wolfram language functions. And again, like I said, optimizing things like syncing your local file system to the cloud system and back and forth, doing a cloud backup. Those are definite priorities for what we're doing. Generally and always, we care about stability and performance. In particular, just general kernel stability and improved user notifications for when and why a kernel dies. That's something we definitely need to improve and should be coming soon. And then there's also a particular focus on improving the performance of dynamics in deployed notebooks. And part of this is coming from Wolfram Alpha notebooks. Part of it's coming from deployed manipulates. That's a key area of focus to improve that performance behavior. We also have some additional input assistance. So if you remember earlier, one of the things that we don't have that the desktop has is a fully featured 2D editor, particularly for output. But we do have several sort of input assistants for alternate ways to input it, whether it's tech, whether it's linear syntax. In this case, the natural language sequencing from Wolfram Alpha. So we're still trying to improve those on incremental, better ways to have input in addition to our long-term goals for improving the editor. And again, we're always looking to improve our accessibility, particularly for screen readers, for content. And so that's some other sort of good news. So in the summary, we're prioritizing rendering Wolfram Alpha notebooks in the cloud, which is general improvements to notebook rendering. A big feature here is the deployed view editing for notebooks for things like Open Cloud, or allowing you to let users start editing and working with your content without having to sign in. Continued integration and improvement of cloud objects, and main stability and performance improvements. Okay, so they gave me a little bit less time than normal, but I think I did okay. So let's open it up to questions. Yeah, that was one of the key things. I probably didn't do a good job of that. Because it's a core notebook feature, basically just an option on a notebook, it just works everywhere. And that's the point. That was the big change between our previous implementation of Open Cloud. It was sort of separate. It didn't just work. And so you'll be able to set this option. Again, it's something you'll have to opt into. The owner of the notebook is going to have to pay for all the evaluations for that. So you have to understand what you're doing ahead of time. We'll make that a very much an opt-in feature, but that's the whole reason why we implemented it this way, is it will just work. So it works in the object deployed view. It should work if you use it in an iframe, and it should work in the embedder, because again, it's not tied to the embedder or the iframe, it's tied to the actual notebook under the hood. It's a great question. Over here in the front. So it's a great question. So how does these integrate? So the Wolfram Cloud is where you're storing your content, typically notebooks. So all of our other desktop front ends will sort of sync to there. So if you do a desktop product just on your typical browser, or not browser, sorry, typical operating system, that's going to be communicating with the cloud. The iOS apps also communicate. And basically the JavaScript front end is another one of those. It just communicates with itself for where you're storing the content. So the cloud is basically where you're storing content, and then you have these different front ends for rendering notebooks usually and interacting or basically pushing or pulling files to the cloud. Some of it. I mean, we're generally improving notebook rendering, and that's what's going to be consistent across those things. And as long as the app is tied into the cloud directly, it should just work there. But there won't be a concept of being able to do this in, say, desktop Mathematica. That won't have a concept of, yeah, sure. Yeah, and again, I'd have to look at your use case, but if it's just viewing it through the cloud, yes, all of those functions come across. If it's viewing it separately, standalone, it's not going to have a concept of sharing this with somebody else. I mean, it's very flexible and it's very much dependent on what you want to do. So one thing is we're not running on the best hardware. So when our public cloud is not running with GPUs. So if the thing you want to do is very GPU intensive, it probably could work, but maybe not as performant as you want it to do. In that case, it makes more sense for doing something on an EPC or talking to us separately, so where we can set that up. If it's more about just wanting to share content. So for example, as part of Stephen's physics project or a blog post, he uses cloud a lot as just a way to share content, which is notebooks. These are pretty big, giant notebooks, which we do a pretty good job of rendering. But the main use case there is not to interact with them, it's just to read them. But then we also have things like Wolfram U, where they're literally asking you to type things directly in cloud and want to do the editing features. So it really depends on what you want to do. And it might require talking to us a little bit to make the right approach. Okay, I think they gave me the stop sign. So I'll try to move on to Matt, who's going to talk more specifically about graphics. And that'll be, it's interesting to graphicsy people, but you might want to stick around or might not. But that's going to be pretty technical talk. So thanks for your time, and try to find me around here. We have an office hours at 4:30, which is just downstairs. And of course, Matt's talk is right afterwards. So thank you.